Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Metropolitan Republican Club's webinar series. My name is Krisha Lenzo, and on behalf of the Met Club board, we're excited to have you join us tonight. As a reminder, we have a donation link in our live chat, and we hope you'll consider making a contribution to help support our club with these programming going forward. Tonight, we have Nicole Rodden joining us. We're very excited to have her. Nicole previously ran for Congress in Georgia and has dedicated much of her life to issues pertaining to human trafficking and the growing and horrific nature that is occurring within our nation. She has worked with several organizations to combat this plague and to encourage the collaboration between the federal and state agencies to overcome it, including law enforcement and also working with nonprofits to end this atrocity once and for all. Nicole is a second-generation American who was born and raised in New York, and she has also served 10 years in the United States Navy Reserves while also working in the private sector. In these experiences, she's led international teams and oversaw navigation, operational safety, drilling, and oil well control in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Black Sea. So it's so important to have her here tonight. And first, she's in Georgia, so we'll also ask her about the Senate race that occurred as well as the election outcome. But we wanted to make sure we have some programming that also is, based on this issue, because it's one that unfortunately has grown over 185% since the previous year. And Nicole will really provide some insights about this topic and problem that's systemic in our country. So welcome, Nicole, and thank you for joining us tonight.
And thank you for having me, inviting me this evening.
Our pleasure. And so, based on that, I wanted to just start off, given your background, which is incredibly impressive. How did you get involved in this fight?
So Krisha, like you mentioned, I sailed all over the world. I was a navigation officer for 13 years where I had worked in or traveled to over 30 different countries by the time that I stopped sailing. What I noticed when I was 18 years old and when I was at the United States Merchant Marine Academy, they had provided training before you went on your cadet shipping part of your education's requirement. And they did educate us to let us know, hey, this does exist. You're going to see this in port cities. How are you going to recognize it? How are you going to make sure that there's no possible way that you could be essentially kidnapped? Mm-hmm. So that was at that moment, at that time, I thought like, okay, that only exists maybe in the movies, or you only see it internationally. Right. So I sailed. You see it in port cities. You're not exactly sure what is going on, whether some of these women actually want to do what they're doing, and whether they're forced into that lifestyle. And for me, it never was a judgment call. It was hard because for so many years when men and women think of prostitution, unfortunately, we do go to judgment and saying that whether they've asked for it or they're choosing that lifestyle. And what I was educated on is, unfortunately, more times than not, it's because they're being forced. And so for me, when I got back to Atlanta, I started talking to a few of my friends who had done mission trips and who actually were starting a nonprofit organization at that time. That was almost 20 years ago. And I did get involved because I had no idea at that point that Atlanta had been almost one of the top 10 cities in the world for human trafficking. That blew my mind. And I knew at that moment in time that I could not just sit back and not do anything about it. I wanted to educate myself. I wanted to know how I can help and how I can impact in making sure that it didn't get worse in my city.
Certainly. And, thanks to people like you, you are creating that impact. And also thanks to our president for really raising awareness on this.
Absolutely.
Why is there so little known about this scourge? And, as you mentioned, one of the top 10 cities in the United States. How is that possible?
Yeah, and sadly, as of I believe the last statistic that I saw on Polaris, I believe Georgia right now is the top 3 state New York is lagging behind, but you're number 14. And that's not something to brag about, obviously, when it comes to this situation. But I think for the longest time, it was something that was a turnoff. It was something that people were in denial that it could not happen in their city. Again, it only happens in the seedy parts of the neighborhoods or the seedy parts of the countries or port cities. And for so long that was the case. But now recognizing that it's so easy to pop into a city, and especially with Atlanta, what made it so easy for trafficking to happen here is because Atlanta had the busiest airport at one point. I think only now we're no longer, and because of COVID. Right. But for the longest time, there were statistics that showed that a man, and it would be businessmen. So again, not what you would perceive as somebody that is going to be a trafficker. I mean, look at Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
I mean, not someone that, characteristically you'd say, oh, that guy looks like someone that would be doing something like this. But they come in, unfortunately, do their business, and then they'd still be able to make it home to have dinner with their family, which is something else that's ugly about trafficking. A lot of the people that are involved in it are men who are married. So that's just another ugly fact that we just need to recognize, and is another reason why we've turned a blind eye on it for so long.
Definitely. And since you mentioned Jeffrey Epstein, obviously that case drew a lot of attention to this issue. But do you think that the trial will actually result in raising more awareness? And if, Ghislaine Maxwell, his supposed girlfriend, lover, is finally brought into court, how do you think that might, help shed light on this topic?
The sad part of it, that light should have been shown on this a long time ago. And I think the only reason that people seem to care is because of who he was, the people that he was connected with, and the kind of money and affluence that he had. The sad thing is that any man or woman with disposable income anywhere between $15 and $1,000 cash in hand could be doing the same exact thing. And they've used this opportunity to rightly so demonize this man. I hope that once a case does, or once she does go to court, that it'll be an opportunity to find out who else there were other connections with, because surely he wasn't the only one involved. And unfortunately, as I've become someone who's educated myself in that world, there's never just one person. It isn't that, it doesn't work that way. So I just hope that people will be invested and want to understand how this could have happened, and how so many people knew and decided to ignore it. Because there's no way that the people that he had, the clout, the people that he knew, they knew what was going on. And I do feel all of them should be held accountable.
Sure. And I mentioned at the beginning that, just in this past year, 185% increase in human trafficking cases. That's an astronomically large percentage. Why do you think that is? And can you explain what you've been seeing as to the rise in these cases?
It is, the first thing too, what people need to understand is that human trafficking really is modern day slavery. And just like it did so long ago, it's a money making industry. And that's why people are not the right kind of people are attracted to it. A quick, statistic here in Atlanta, in 2017, the trafficking industry grew from 232 million to $290 billion. And that was from 2012 to 2017. It just that's why it's so hard to combat it, because people are finding opportunities to make money on either slave labor or sex labor.
So where do these individuals come from? I mean, if they're in the States, are they coming from abroad? How are these people roped in, young children, how are they brought into this?
Sadly, a lot of people would like to believe, just like in the movies, that it's some person from overseas that is coming into our country and just victimizing these young men and even young women. Unfortunately, like I said, it's your everyday American who, whatever, they have found a way to be a predator to young women, young men, and being able to make money off of it. Social media has been, and we've had this conversation, it has been probably the biggest catalyst for the increase, that 185% increase. And right now, I think that we're finding ourselves in a situation where these predators have access to our children that they didn't have before the TikToks and the Instagrams and all the different social media platforms that make it so easy that if a girl had any kind of insecurity, or if a guy had any kind of insecurity, there's always someone lurking who will go be and try to reach out, be their friend. And these are stories that we've heard time and time again. Yes, there are women that are runaways that end up getting trafficked, or that are into drugs that end up getting trafficked. But sadly, most of our victims we find are just come from situations of whether they were abused in the household, or whether they also had any kind of insecurity issues. And that's a problem.
It's so sad, and you and I have discussed it. I mean, a lot of politicians, it is now becoming, coming to the fore, this issue, but a lot of politicians are talking about it and they're using it as a platform,
right?
But they're not actually doing anything. And you are doing something. You've been, talking about this problem for so long. So can you tell us about, what you've been doing and what we can do in New York and around the United States, around the globe, hopefully? What can we do?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so I will, we definitely have to give so much credit really to the Trump administration for what this administration had accomplished for human trafficking. And because I don't want to misquote any statistics. I need the audience to understand this, because they saw that it was a problem, and instead of talking about it, they did something to address it. And so this White House created the first ever White House position that was solely focused on combating human trafficking. They brought the problem to the president, recognized it needed to be addressed, done. Another big a big win for us, and this did affect us here in Georgia, is when the president approved the largest Department of Justice grant package in history to combat human trafficking, including the first ever grants for safe housing for survivors. So what that did was allow, now the organizations that I was working with, the Atlanta Dream Center, and I volunteer with Out of Darkness. These are nonprofits. They don't have the ability or the funding that the federal government can provide. Also, they never had the ability to really either seek protection or knowing that they're going to have the justice system on their side. And now we had an administration that was going to make sure that if you were caught, if you were a trafficker, that there were serious consequences. There were federal consequences on the other end, and a way to be prosecuted that way. We hadn't seen that before. And what I recognize with working with these organizations, now that you have the local government, state government, and federal government on your side, you're going to be able to get more things done, and you're going to feel that whatever you're able to do private sector wise, there are protections in place for you and the women that you help rescue.
And as you mentioned, a lot of this legislation and the organizations, which we'll also put up a link on our site. So if those of you who want to volunteer, you can please sign up to learn more. But a lot of this is following the money. It's a money trail, as you said. How can we track this money? And I mean, is it possible to do so?
That for me, and recognizing that now there are new ways to pay for things. I don't know what Bitcoin is going to do in that industry. And I'm the kind of person that will say, if I don't know something, I'll gladly find the answer for it. But I think there are exchanges like that is going to make it more challenging to follow the money. And what we've also found that now that cyberspace has made it even easier to have access to these young men and women who, quite frankly, are usually under the age of 13 years old, and incredibly vulnerable. That's going to be another challenge, and why it was so important to have these grants in place, and to recognize that if we can all work together within the private sector, within our local government, and holding them accountable and saying, hey, there was an administration who wanted to support an effort to combat this ugliness, not just here, but they even, this administration had even wanted to address this overseas as well, recognizing that it is important and it's a worldwide issue. So again, all we can do right now is to make sure that we're doing our part to educate ourselves. And the way I educated myself was to do well, I don't know how it will be now, whether there's training in person because of the COVID situation, but there are online webinars that you can be a part of, just so you can recognize and see what it looks like, and look for the signs. And this comes to, I mean, we talked about this, you having a younger sister and recognizing if there is something that those vulnerabilities, the red flags that can keep you alert.
Sure.
As a sister, as a friend, as a daughter, because unfortunately so many of these kids who are the victims of these predators, people just don't know the signs to look for. And it really comes down, like I said, if they're abusive household, any kind of insecurity issue, and trying to seek that kind of love, appreciation just from someone else. And unfortunately, that someone else usually finds a way to take advantage of the situation.
And definitely, and I know even now, I think doctors in many cities are being trained. I think even in Florida, they're being trained to look out for these signs. If patients come in with abuse, or things like that, it's definitely becoming more prevalent, this type of training. So it's very important to know how to handle it, of course.
Right.
But in terms of which states are dealing with this the most, and also which places, I think you and I also discussed where are the big hotbeds of where this is occurring.
Yeah. So interesting that you mentioned Florida. Florida is actually the #1 state where sex trafficking is happening. So I do appreciate that piece of information that you share, that there are our healthcare workers that are looking for those signs. What is scary right now, though, there was a time where we know that the teachers, and here in Georgia, our first lady, Marty Kemp, she had a big initiative with Grace about educating for, against human trafficking, what it looks like, recognizing and educating our educators, the ones that are in school with these kids, to be able to just sniff out the signs of any kind of just if there was a situation that needed to be addressed. And that also with COVID right now, when you don't have the kids in the classroom,
you can't tell.
You can't. So it really is going to be up to those of us who can be around, and for parents and siblings, anyone who really cares about our family members and friends, to do our part to ask what's going on in their lives. And I don't know, for me, coming from the family that I come from, there's no such thing as like, oh, it's not your business, or I couldn't even imagine having a cell phone at 9 years old and me telling my mom and dad, no, you can't have access to my privacy. Like, that doesn't exist. What people need to recognize is there's a fine line between privacy and protecting those you love.
We had an audience question. Someone asked if Florida is number one. Have you seen Governor DeSantis stepping up on this issue?
I have been focused so much in Georgia and seeing what is going on here, but from what I'm hearing from friends on the ground in Florida, other candidates who had ran for office there, it does matter to the governor, and I'm positive that recognizing that they are number one in the state, in the country, in the country right now, that this is something that they need to address. And as much as we recognize that COVID has taken our eyes off of so many other important issues, just like everyone here, I'm praying to put COVID behind us so we can focus on these issues that are still impacting us on a daily basis. And even more so now, when everyone is locked up at home and the cyberspace predators are running rampant.
Yeah, and even the news cycle now, obviously, is just, we'll get to the Georgia Senate race, obviously. But, that's why we wanted to continue doing this programming, because no matter what, we need to talk about this issue, and we need to raise awareness, and it can't be eclipsed by anything. There's really, in my opinion, nothing more important. It's beyond. But in terms about, what about the portion of human trafficking? I think it's possibly up to 80%, which is forced labor and concentration, construction, agriculture, and domestic work. Someone asked, how do we bring more attention to that? And that was, an audience question someone had written in.
Yeah, and so that was another part of what this administration's initiatives were, and it really was to have all professionals at any level to make sure that civil society, local law enforcement, and government officials could understand, recognize, and know how to bring attention or to bring someone to justice if there is a problem. So I think for, what that looks like is that it really is going to be, at this point, up to us to see how involved we want to be, what we can do, and what groups we can partner with. And for me, it was the Atlanta Dream Center was a big one, and understanding what their platform was. And because they are faith-based, not all of them are, but that was important to me as well, for these young women to recognize that they are loved no matter what their decisions are. And there's an opportunity for them, once they get out of that being enslaved, to step back into the light.
Someone else, we're turning more towards audience questions now. They have a lot. Do you think the Biden administration will take an interest in this issue and prioritize it?
I hope so.
Right.
I hope so. There's so many positive things that this administration accomplished that no one talked about, which absolutely breaks my heart, because I rather focus on a tweet rather than things that are done and how many lives have actually been impacted.
Right.
but I really hope so. This should never have been a partisan issue, regardless. It's just like Trisha and I spoke about. It's unfortunate that candidates just used it as just leverage when they were running for office rather than doing something about it. And I think that if more people just got involved, and when they say that they care about something, they actually did something about it, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now.
In terms of some of the legislation too, and maybe signing petitions and things like that to raise awareness for our politicians to really step up, is there certain sites or what should we be doing right now to get them to really do their job and defend these people?
So I like I said, I was very fortunate that there were groups here, and I wish I could say which groups in each and everyone's different states of who to get involved with. But for me, I would say I would start definitely at the local level, because now recognizing that these grants are in place and there is funding for the states to address the situation, why wouldn't they want to? Unfortunately, I really hope that people won't use this time there's nothing to politicize with this issue. Slavery is slavery. So if you're against slavery, why wouldn't you want to hold people accountable and say, hey, okay, you're against this. This is a problem. This is a situation that isn't getting better. COVID made it worse. We have funding, we have the private sector, we have local, state, and federal that are behind this and want to champion this cause. What are we doing? What are we doing to make sure that we're making those improvements? And I would definitely call out your states at the local level. It would be your state senators. And find out what they're doing about it. If it was an issue that makes a difference, to find out they should have the information statistically on how it is affecting your city, and recognizing it and that it is a problem. Just like you and I talked about, Trisha, I know we spoke about how most of the time, a lot of the biggest trafficking events would be, the Super Bowl, Olympics, concerts, big conferences. I jested, but my husband's a civil engineer, and there was before COVID, a World of Concrete in Las Vegas, and people think, oh well, it's just going to be a bunch of civil engineers and construction people and all these things. And unfortunately, when you look at the statistics and who the people who are going to submit to any kind of trafficking and paying for those kind of services, they fit the mold. And as sorry as that is, so I personally cringed when the Super Bowl was held here in Atlanta, because I knew what was going to happen. But because of what Trump's administration had done, we had on the federal level, we had support, and they were able to break out a ring. And I believe at that time, don't quote, but I believe it was about 35 women that they were able to rescue. To some, that might not sound like a lot, but if you were one of those 35 women, you changed your life forever.
I get chills. I mean, every time we talk about this issue, it really, and even the Super Bowl, I had no idea that this was occurring until President Trump raised awareness. And it's just astonishing. It's happening right under our noses, and so frustrating and upsetting. And this, is definitely, we need to stop this. And it is an amazing number that they were able to rescue that many people. So someone asked that, okay, I'm going to the next question. I think we can now turn to, since you are in Georgia, wanted to hear, we don't want to completely ignore the state races.
I kind of want to.
I know. We're doing counter programming tonight, which is, again, as we said, equally important, if not more so. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground there right now, and also the races in general. Obviously, you ran, I mentioned at the beginning, ran for Congress in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I think that, put it this way, I was as gutted as any other supporter of the president with the results. But I recognized that I still needed to step up and vote for the two candidates that I knew have carry my values, and I know that the policies that I want to put in place and make sure to preserve from the president's administration, it was important to step up and vote. Unfortunately, I think so many folks here in Georgia were just still so angry and didn't know who and what to believe, and they stayed home. And what they thought may have been something as a message to DC and a message to in support of the president, even though he encouraged them to vote, they did the state of Georgia and, quite frankly, the entire United States a disservice, at least for those that wanted to preserve what this administration had accomplished. And now I dread to see what the next 2 years are and how much the Democrats are going to try to push forward over the next 2 years. So,
and
yeah.
In terms of being in Atlanta, you know, what is it like today when you're outside, and what's happening locally? Like, there's shutdowns or?
So the Governor Kemp did speak at 5 o'clock this evening. The National Guard is on call. Mm-hmm. And we don't know what that's going to look like. My understanding was that in most cities nationwide, there were at the Capitol, there were anywhere between a dozen to several hundred Trump supporters, demanding a change, whatever the demands were. I just hope and pray that people recognize that, hey, we can be effective, make a positive change in 2022. We need to get back to work. And I hope that should not make me someone that doesn't support what this administration accomplished, because I know that he benefited millions of people, including my family as a new small business owner, and recognizing that had it not been what he had put in place, I might not be having this conversation with a little bit of a smile on my face here, but also recognizing that as angry as people might be with our Governor Kemp, Georgia was the first state to reopen. And I tell people all the time, hey, you might be angry because of what he said or what he didn't do for this election, but you have your job. And no offense, we're not in New York and California right now, where if you didn't lose your job, your job during COVID, and you're just able to make it to November, then they shut everything down again. And I have friends who have businesses there, and it's gutting. It's absolutely gutting. So I hope this is just a wake up call that we, Republicans, we need to, our messaging just needs improvement, and our messengers need to reflect just our entire community a little bit better. And and to me, I don't see that as identity politics. What I see is recognizing that our party has people that look like us, that come from unique backgrounds, and we all hold the same values as any other conservative that loves this country, that is a patriot, that does believe in the Constitution, and that wants to make sure that we provide a better life for our family, for our kids, and for the next generations to follow.
I love that. That's a great note for us to end on. But before we do, I want to just also mention we're going to post the resources that Nicole mentioned previously, as well as for those of you who are from New York, from the Met Club, we will send out resources here in Manhattan and outer boroughs. But Nicole, where can we find you, and how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more? I know you have a great Twitter account, but wanted to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Twitter, it's at Nicole Rodden GA, and same thing on Facebook. And you're more than welcome to also can post my email as well if there are any other further questions, and even my mobile, because this is something that is very important to me. If there are connections that I can help make, I'd be more than happy to. If I don't know the answer, I will not lie to you. I will say I do not know, and I will do my best to find out. And I just appreciate that everyone took the time to just learn a little bit more, and I hope that it will encourage you to research, to get involved, and to talk to family, friends, and really do a checkup, especially on our young men and women, just to see where they're at, and to make sure that they're not encountering any kind of predators or predator activity. And we just need to do a better job at recognizing what that looks like. And I think this will help. And I do believe that once people take the time to do the research and see what the red flags are, we'll do our part to make sure that we combat this ugliness and knock those stats down. And I'd be excited to see what those numbers will look like in 2021.
Well, thanks to you, I'm sure we're moving in a right direction with your leadership. I have learned so much from speaking with you on this subject matter, and especially now when there's so much evil and despair in the world, to be involved in an organization that helps those in need at this time when we're all distracted by our own lives and COVID and the election and everything. This is a way of really centering and connecting to people and changing the world. And it's cliche, but making a difference. And
Yep.
And thanks to leaders like you, we're so honored to have you here this evening, Nicole. And we wish you the best. And
Thank you
for your time. And we will stay connected.
Yes, and have a happy and healthy and safe 2021. And just let's do our part to, like you said, let's do our part to make our world, our country, a better place.
Definitely. Thank you, and take care, everyone, and stay well and stay safe. Have a great evening.